I drove across state lines on Christmas Eve, parked outside my father's house, and watched him celebrate without me. My brother got a gift. My chair was empty. And that's when I realized I wasn't forgotten. I was erased. 3 days earlier, my father sent me a text. One sentence, no explanation. Christmas dinner is family only this year. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I texted. Nothing. Then my stepmother followed up with 4 words that cut deeper than the silence. Don't take it personal. I had flown home from deployments for holidays. I had sent money when my dad lost his job. I paid for my brother's rehab twice. And now on Christmas Eve, I was sitting in the dark, watching through a window, as if I had never existed. I didn't knock. I didn't cry. I drove away and made a decision that would change everything. Before I keep going, I want to say this. If you've ever been cut out, dismissed, or made to feel like you didn't belong in your own family, you're not alone. If this story hits something personal for you, stay with me. And if you feel comfortable, share your story in the comments. Sometimes the quiet ones need to hear they weren't wrong for walking away. The house glowed golden from within, like a painting of warmth I could no longer touch. Inside, I watched him lift a glass, laugh, and hand my brother a carefully wrapped gift. My name was never mentioned. My chair was never set. For 2 hours, I had driven across state lines, thinking maybe, just maybe, his text had been a mistake. That somehow I'd misunderstood, that I was still his daughter. But from the shadows outside that window, I saw everything I needed to see. I wasn't forgotten. I was erased. 3 days earlier, the wound had opened. A text message, 1 line, from my father. Christmas dinner is family only this year. That was it. No explanation, no follow-up, just a full stop. I'd called, straight to voicemail. I texted, nothing. By nightfall, a message came from my stepmother, Cheryl. Don't take it personal. It's just intimate family this year. Those 4 words carved themselves into my ribs. Don't take it personal. It was personal. I'd spent every holiday I could flying home from deployment. I'd wired money when Dad lost his job. I'd helped cover rehab for my brother, Drew, twice. I'd been the one who showed up when no one else did. And now they were pretending I didn't exist. The warmth inside that house was no accident. It was curated, chosen, and I had been unchosen. I turned away from the window, back to my truck. I didn't cry. I didn't knock. I didn't scream. I drove to the only place open on Highway 22, a small-town diner with flickering lights and a crooked tree in the corner. I ordered pecan pie and black coffee, watched families come in, laughing, bickering, hugging. That's when the decision clicked. It wasn't loud, it was clean, quiet. If my family didn't want me in their home, I would build a home where I was wanted. And no one, not my father, not Drew, not Cheryl, would ever be able to take that from me again. I pulled out my laptop, opened a browser, and typed a sentence that would change everything. Montana ranch property for sale. A week later, I was on a cramped regional flight headed north, watching snow-capped ridgelines pass beneath the wing. Each mile took me further from the diner, further from the house I once called home, and closer to something unclaimed. Not just land, something deeper, autonomy. I wasn't chasing serenity. I was building a boundary. By the time I landed in Kalispell, the cold hit like a slap. Sharp and clarifying. Carol, the local real estate agent, met me outside the terminal, 60-something gray hair pulled back, boots planted like she'd been born in the soil. She didn't ask personal questions, just said, "You Olivia Reynolds? Let's take a drive." We passed silent barns, frozen fences, and pine trees bending under snow. She talked about wind patterns and well depths, not about me, and I was grateful. When she turned off the road onto a gravel driveway, a wooden sign swung loosely on rusted chains. Reynolds Ridge, established 1972. I blinked. Reynolds? Carol just smiled. You said that's your last name. Thought maybe it was a sign. The house wasn't impressive. A single-story ranch with peeling paint, sagging porch, and a barn that leaned like it was tired of holding itself up. But something about it felt right. The way it didn't try to be perfect. The way it simply stood. As we stepped up to the porch, Carol gave the lock a tug before pulling out a set of keys. Bank changed these a few months back. Last folks trying to buy it couldn't get their financing together. Some developer deal, vacation rentals or cabins, I think. I paused. Why'd the deal fall through? She shrugged. Montana banks don't love bold dreams without bold deposits. Anyway, their loss, your gain. She said it casually, like it meant nothing, but something in the way she brushed it off stuck with me. Like the wind had shifted direction without anyone noticing. Inside smelled like dust and memory, faded wallpaper, old stone fireplace, a window over the sink that looked out over an empty field. I stood in that kitchen and imagined a version of Christmas that didn't require permission. A pot on the stove, a dog asleep near the hearth, a table set, always for one more. I'll take it, I said. Carol raised an eyebrow. You don't want to sleep on it? I've done enough sleeping on other people's timelines, I replied. It wasn't about the house. It was about ownership. Not just legally, emotionally. The bank wanted it gone. 40 acres, some timber, water rights. The price was low. Too low. Foreclosed a year back, Carol said. Previous family couldn't hold it. 3 weeks later, the papers were signed. My name, mine alone, on the deed. For the first time in years, I didn't have to ask to belong somewhere. I just did. The Marine in me kicked in. I replaced locks, installed cameras, motion lights along the driveway, one camera at the front door, another pointed at the back field. Not because I was scared, because I knew what it felt like to be blindsided. A few mornings in, while I was adjusting a porch sensor, a white county SUV pulled up. The man who stepped out looked carved from the same mountains that surrounded us. Broad, quiet, late 60s. You Olivia Reynolds? He asked. Yes, sir. Sheriff Nash, he said. Just introducing myself. Folks around here get curious when someone moves onto old land. I'm not related to the previous owners. You military? I nodded. Marines, now working legal side. He gave a small smile. You stand like you're about to give a briefing. I laughed. Force of habit. He nodded at the cameras. Smart. Land brings out the best and worst in families. You own something, people start remembering they know you. At the time, I thought it was just a folksy warning. Later, I realized it was the first clue that the past wasn't as far behind me as I thought. It had been just over a month. My days were filled with fixing what was broken, mending fence lines, shoveling snow, hauling debris from the barn. Evenings were for coffee on the porch and silence that didn't ache. Then the mail came. A thin envelope forwarded from my old address. The name on it wasn't mine, Daniel Reynolds. I almost tossed it, but the last name made me pause. Inside was a typed letter from a small legal firm and a printout of an email thread. It mentioned a failed financing deal, the foreclosure of the property I now owned, the client who'd missed the deadline, Drew Reynolds, my brother. I stared at the page, the cold creeping from my fingertips into my chest. Drew, who never lifted a hammer in his life, who never cared for hard work or quiet spaces, had tried to buy this land, the land I now called home. For days, I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Reynolds was a common name. Maybe it wasn't him. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the distance I'd put between us was shorter than I thought. 2 mornings later, my phone lit up. Dad. I froze. My thumb hovered over the screen, torn between instinct and exhaustion. I answered. "Olivia," he said, "you bought land." Not a greeting, not surprise, an accusation. Yes, I did. "You should have talked to me first." I stepped outside, letting the wind ground me. "Talk to you, Dad? You didn't even invite me to Christmas." "That's different. We're not discussing that." "No, we are. You cut me out of the holiday and then get angry when I make a decision about my own life?" He was silent. Then he cleared his throat. "Drew needs a house. He's had a hard year. That ranch, that was supposed to be his chance." The cold turned sharper. "Are you saying Drew tried to buy this land?" "Of course he did," Dad snapped. "He saw a future there. And then you." "Then I what?" I asked quietly. "You took what wasn't yours." I laughed, a bitter exhale. "Dad, it was a foreclosure. I didn't even know Drew wanted it. I bought what was available, fair and square." "Well, now he's out of options," Dad said, "and you have a chance to make it right. Sign part of it over, or sell it to him." "No." Dad inhaled sharply. "After everything I've done for you." I cut him off. "After everything I've done for you, don't call me again unless it's to apologize." I hung up. The wind picked up, scattering dry snow across the porch. I stood there, breath fogging in the cold, heart thudding against ribs that had carried too many expectations for too long. That night, Sheriff Nash stopped by as I was stacking firewood. "You okay?" he asked. "Just had a long phone call," I said. "Family." I nodded. He looked out over the darkening field. "Watch those cameras. People do strange things when pride and property mix." I didn't tell him what I feared, that the line between distance and danger was getting thinner. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the fire, watching the gate camera on my phone like a soldier on watch. Not afraid, prepared. Because something was coming. That night, after hanging up on Dad, I didn't pace or cry or reach for old comforts. I sat at the edge of my bed, holding the deed in one hand and my old dog tags in the other, weighing a history I never asked to carry. There was a time when I'd have given anything to be let back in, to be invited, included, seen. But somewhere between that text message and this piece of land, something had shifted. Maybe I wasn't erased. Maybe I'd just stopped asking for space at a table that kept shrinking around me. Now I was building my own. The old story was gone, and I was no longer a side character in someone else's script. I was writing myself back in, with silence, with land, with law. And this time, no one would edit me out. 2 weeks after the call, I woke to a soft buzz. It was still dark out, barely 5 a.m. My phone screen showed a motion alert from the front gate. I rubbed sleep from my eyes and opened the feed. Headlights, multiple. I threw on boots and a jacket, phone in hand. From the window above the kitchen sink, I saw the silhouettes. People milling around the gate, a van, a man kneeling with a tool bag. A locksmith. I zoomed in on the screen. Dad, Drew, Cheryl, and a fourth man in a puffy coat holding a clipboard. A realtor. They weren't here to talk, they were here to take. I called Sheriff Nash. He picked up before the first ring ended. "They're here," I whispered. "They brought a locksmith." "I'm on my way," he said. "Stay inside. Do not confront them." "I won't," I lied. Then I called Rachel. Captain Rachel Monroe, JAG Corps, Fort Harrison, my friend, my mentor, the one who told me once, "Entitlement wears a polite face until it doesn't." She answered with a calmness I didn't feel. "Tell me everything," she said. "They're at the gate," I said, trying to force entry. "Record it. Don't open the door. Walt will handle the first wave. I'll be on the road in 5. I put her on speaker and watched. Dad was gesturing broadly, like a salesman. The realtor nodded, but unease was written in his posture. Cheryl stood stiff, arms crossed, like she didn't want to be there. Drew paced like a caged animal. "That's the house," Dad said, voice audible on the feed. "She's not even living here. She bought it to spite us." The locksmith was already at work. "She's off playing soldier somewhere," Dad muttered. "The locks won't be a problem." Rage bloomed behind my ribs, but I held still. On screen, Drew pounded on the gate. "Olivia, stop pretending. We know you left. You don't live here." "She can't do this," Dad barked. "This land was meant for us." Rachel's voice cut in quietly, like a scalpel. "Let them talk. Let them incriminate themselves." Then a new set of headlights appeared. A white SUV, Sheriff Nash. Dad turned, caught off guard. "Sheriff, morning." Walt stepped out, calm, unreadable. "Folks," he said evenly, "this is private property. You are not the deed holders, you are trespassing." "There's been a misunderstanding," Dad replied. "My daughter, she's unstable. She bought this to lash out. She needs help." "You brought a locksmith," Walt said. "That's not help. That's attempted unlawful entry." The locksmith froze. "They said they had authority." "They don't," Walt replied. "Pack up, now." The realtor cleared his throat. "Mr. Reynolds, perhaps we should—" "Don't start," Dad snapped. "You said you'd list it today." "I said I'd evaluate, pending documentation. This is not documentation." Walt's voice turned steely. "Step away from the gate, all of you." Drew scoffed. "Or what? You'll arrest us for standing." "If you break that lock, yes." That's when I stepped outside. The crunch of snow beneath my boots was the only sound for a long moment. They all turned. Dad's jaw dropped. "You thought I wasn't here," I said. "You thought you could steal my home." "Olivia," Cheryl began, but her voice faltered. Drew stepped forward. "We thought you were deployed. You're not even living here full time." "This land is mine," I said, "legally, factually, morally." Rachel arrived, her posture military, her voice lethal in its calm. "Captain Rachel Monroe, Judge Advocate General's Corps, advising Ms. Reynolds." Dad blinked. "This is a family matter." "No," she said. "This is a legal matter, and you're in violation of multiple statutes." Rachel handed Walt a folder. "Certified deed, purchase contract, video documentation." Walt flipped through it, then looked at the group. "Mr. Reynolds, Mrs. Reynolds, Mr. Drew Reynolds, leave now or I will escort you with cuffs." Drew's face flushed. "You think you're better than us, Olivia?" "No," I said. "I think I finally stopped letting you decide what I'm allowed to own." "You stole this," he shouted. "I had plans." Plans without financing, dreams without effort. He opened his mouth, but Rachel cut in. You brought a locksmith to a home you don't own. That's not a plan, that's trespass. The locksmith had already vanished. The realtor apologized and left in a cloud of dust. Dad stayed planted, face a battleground between pride and fear. You're overreacting, he said. We were trying to fix a mistake. You made promises to Drew you couldn't keep, I said, and now you want me to pay the price for them again. You always play the victim, he spat. You act like you're the only one who sacrificed. I served, I saved, I sacrificed, and I'm done pretending. That makes me less worthy of peace. Sheriff Nash checked his watch. One last time, leave now. Dad looked at me, at Rachel, at Walt, then finally at Drew, whose eyes darted like a child lost at the mall. They got in their truck, no words, just exhaust smoke, curling into the air behind them. I stayed at the gate until they disappeared over the ridge. Then I turned to Walt. They'll come back. Probably, he said, but now they know this isn't a soft target. The cold didn't sting anymore. It cleared me. This wasn't revenge. This was a line drawn in snow and law and bone. The silence that followed was deceptive. For days after the attempted takeover, the ranch held its breath. No more headlights, no calls, no signs of Drew or my father. Just the snow falling heavier, the wind rattling the shutters, and my cameras blinking their quiet watch through the long Montana nights. Then, one afternoon, a yellow stickered envelope arrived, forwarded mail again. Inside, another hint of the past clawing forward, a development proposal filed months earlier. Name on the form, Drew Reynolds. He'd planned to build cabins, rentals, had pitched it to a local developer, even bragged online about the deal he was closing. But the documents told the truth. He never secured the financing. The deal collapsed, and the bank reclaimed the land. The same land I now owned outright. I told myself this would settle things, that reality would take hold. But by then, I'd already learned that people like Drew, and people like my father, don't surrender to facts. They only double down when the narrative starts slipping away. The next call came late, and I let it go to voicemail. Then another. By the fourth call, fatigue outweighed restraint, and I answered. Dad's voice snapped through the speaker like a snapped branch. You need to stop whatever legal action you're taking against us. I haven't taken any legal action, I said flatly. Sheriff Nash filed a trespass report because you trespassed. He scoffed. That was unnecessary. We just wanted to talk. You brought a locksmith to my home, I reminded him. You didn't come to talk. The locksmith came on his own, he said too quickly, a lie so obvious it almost made me laugh. Dad, I said evenly, the cameras recorded everything. There was a beat of silence, then his voice shifted, defensive, pressured. Fine, we made a mistake, but Drew's in trouble, real trouble. He's over his head, he needs a place. This land, it could have saved him. And what about me? I asked, the edge of exhaustion sharper than anger now. What about my fresh start? He didn't answer. I could hear the gears turning in his silence, searching for a way to justify asking me to sacrifice again. Because you can handle it, he finally muttered. There it was, the truth, the core rule of our family. I could carry the weight, so they could keep letting it go. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I said, Dad, if Drew is drowning, that's tragic, but it's not my responsibility to let him pull me under with him. Not again. He pushed harder. Transfer the deed into all our names temporarily, just until he gets stable. No. You're being dramatic. Families solve things together. I didn't reply. I ended the call. That night, I sat on the porch, wrapped in a wool blanket, watching the snow settle across the fields. The ranch looked untouched, but I felt the fracture running just beneath it. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Cheryl. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Olivia, your dad hasn't told you everything. Drew, he's in deep debt, drinking, people he owes money to. Your dad promised this land as collateral. He thought if he could get it in Drew's name, maybe he could fix it all. He's embarrassed and scared. None of it excuses what they did, but I thought you should know. I sat for a long time after the message ended, mug cooling in my hands. A father cornered by promises he couldn't keep. A brother buried under his own wreckage. And as always, I was expected to carry it all. But I wasn't angry. I was tired. So tired. The next morning, I drove into town and met with Sheriff Nash. We finalized the trespass report. He scanned the transcript of the recordings, highlighted sections, signed the file, and handed me a copy. You're safe now, he said. This land is yours, Olivia. They can't touch it. But the safety I felt had nothing to do with documents. It came from something else, knowing I hadn't bent. Not this time. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about Drew. Not the man standing at my gate yelling, but the boy who used to ask me to read him bedtime stories. The boy who made me a lopsided paper crown in 2nd grade and called me his best sister in the universe. That boy was gone. But maybe the man he became didn't have to stay lost. It was a week before I saw Drew again. I was fixing a loose hinge on the barn door, the sun low behind the ridge, when I heard the crunch of tires on snow. I turned, expecting a delivery or maybe Sheriff Nash checking in. It was Drew's truck. He pulled up slowly, like someone approaching a border checkpoint. He got out alone. No bluster, no backup. Just a too large jacket hanging off his frame and a face that looked older than it had any right to. He didn't slam the door or strut toward me. He just stood there with his hands shoved into his coat pockets, staring at the ground like it had answers he couldn't find in himself. Hey, Liv, he said, voice soft. Not Olivia, not thief, just Liv. I set the wrench down and leaned against the barn. Does Dad know you're here? He shook his head. No, he'd be pissed I came alone. Then it's probably the first good choice you've made in a while, I said, not with spite, just weary honesty. He managed a tight smile, but it disappeared just as quickly. Can I talk to you? He asked. Just us. I nodded once, and we walked to the porch together. We sat on the top step, the wood cold even through our jeans. He rubbed his hands together, exhaled hard, and for a long moment said nothing. I messed up, he began, still looking at the snow-covered field. I really thought I could make that deal work. When that developer pitched the idea, cabins, rental income, I thought maybe this was my chance. I wasn't just dreaming. I wanted something real, something stable. He swallowed hard, his breath uneven. But I lied. I didn't have the credit. I didn't tell Dad how bad things were. I just kept saying it was handled. And when I found out you'd bought the land, his voice cracked. It felt like everything I'd been holding onto vanished. I didn't interrupt. I let the silence hold him until he was ready. Dad kept saying it was yours to give me, that you'd do the right thing, like always, so I leaned on that. I leaned on you again. You let him believe I'd sacrifice again, I said quietly. I did, he admitted, because it was easier than admitting I'd failed. He looked over at me, eyes red around the edges. I'm sorry, Liv, for everything, the yelling, the locksmith, the accusations. You didn't deserve any of it. I nodded slowly. I appreciate that, truly. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I just didn't want you to think I hated you. I never did. He hesitated. I was jealous. You went out into the world and made something of yourself. You survived things I couldn't even imagine. Dad never gave you credit, but I saw it. You were always the strong one, the one who held it all together. And the more together you were, the smaller I felt. His words hit with a weight I hadn't prepared for. Not anger, not excuses, just truth. I took a breath and said, Drew, I spent so many years trying to carry this family, to be the steady one. And I think somewhere along the way, I forgot that being strong doesn't mean letting people walk over me. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I get that now. We sat together until the sun began slipping behind the tree line, painting the snow in gold. If you're serious about wanting a fresh start, I said, I'll help, but not by giving away this land. Not by letting Dad make choices for me. We do this the right way. No lies, no shortcuts. He looked at me, more humble than I'd ever seen him. I'd like that. He stood, hesitated, then leaned in for a quick, awkward hug. I let him. He needed it more than I did. When he drove away, I stayed on the porch, watching his taillights disappear behind the ridge. The tension in my shoulders eased, not because the wound had healed, but because it had been acknowledged. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt like maybe, not certainly, but maybe, something could be salvaged. Spring came slowly, carving veins of thaw through the snowbanks and softening the sharp edges of winter. The ranch, once frozen and silent, began to breathe again. I patched roof shingles in the sun, cleared debris from the creek bed, and let the stillness do its work. Then, one April afternoon, a familiar truck pulled up the drive. It wasn't Drew. Dad stepped out alone. No Cheryl, no bravado, no clipboard. Just him, older than I remembered, shoulders hunched like he'd been carrying something that finally broke him. I didn't go to him. I didn't invite him in. I stood on the porch and waited. He walked halfway up, stopped, and looked at the ground between us. I did wrong by you, he said, voice hoarse. By both of you. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't performative. It was something closer to surrender. I thought I was helping Drew survive, he continued, but all I was doing was teaching him that someone else would always fix things, that he'd never have to face himself. I folded my arms, not to shield myself, but to stay grounded. And me? I asked. He flinched. I taught you that you didn't matter as much, that your strength meant you didn't need anything, that you could carry it all without ever putting it down. There was nothing defensive in his tone, no deflection. Just an old man standing in the wreckage of his own design. He cleared his throat. Cheryl's been pushing for counseling. I'm going, trying anyway. That stopped me. My father, the man who once said therapy was for people too weak to fix their own mess, now standing in front of me, admitting he needed help. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, meeting my eyes. But I'd like a chance at whatever relationship you're willing to have. I didn't rush to respond. I let the silence settle, let the weight of the moment land where it needed to. I need boundaries, I said. That's the only way forward. He nodded. I can do that. And for the first time in years, I believed him. He didn't stay long. We didn't hug. He didn't ask to come inside. But when he left, he didn't look over his shoulder. There was no grand exit, no parting words, just a man retreating, with the knowledge that rebuilding takes more than a visit. It takes time, consistency, proof. And I would wait, not because I needed him to change, but because I needed to see if he actually would. In the weeks that followed, Drew returned now and then. He helped patch the barn roof, replaced the bent gate hinge, cleared deadwood from the back pasture. He showed up quietly, without expecting applause. We didn't talk much about the past, but we didn't avoid it either. Dad started calling before visiting. Cheryl sent homemade bread. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. Just slow steps toward something that didn't hurt to hold. Easter came quietly, and I set a table for 5. Rachel, Drew, Dad, Cheryl, and me. It wasn't formal, just warm. The first 20 minutes were careful. Then came real laughter, not forced, just small and honest, the kind that doesn't ask for attention. After the dishes were cleared, I stepped outside. The sky had already begun its slow fade into indigo. The air was cool, the breeze gentle, no symbols, just peace. This land had started as a refuge, a declaration, a boundary drawn in soil and deed. But it had become something else, something better. Not a fortress, a home, not an escape, a foundation. I didn't buy this place to take revenge. I bought it to remember who I was when no one else did. And in doing that, I found something no one could steal: peace. The days after Easter settled into a new rhythm. Not perfect, not storybook, but honest. Drew came by twice a week, fixing what needed fixing, asking questions instead of assuming answers. Sometimes we worked side by side in silence. Other times we talked about everything except the land. We didn't pretend the past didn't happen. We just stopped letting it define every word between us. Dad kept his distance, but he showed up, on time, with notice, never uninvited. He brought fencing tools once, helped install a new post without commentary. He didn't lecture, didn't reminisce. He just worked. And when he left, he said, "Thank you," like he meant it. That was new. Cheryl sent handwritten notes, apologies folded into recipes. Her way of speaking without stepping on sore ground. I didn't write back, but I used the bread recipe. Sometimes the best replies are the quiet ones. The cameras stayed up, the locks stayed changed, the trespass report sat in a folder under my bed. Not because I expected another ambush, but because now I understood the value of being prepared. The ranch changed with the seasons, buds on trees, grass fighting its way through the snowpack. The creek began to flow again, slow and steady, like healing, and so did I. What started as a cold night in a diner, a bitter slice of pie, and a decision made in silence, had become a life built on soil no one else could lay claim to. For so long I had been the strong one, the dependable one, the one who bent without breaking. But this place taught me something different. Strength isn't about bending. It's about knowing when to stop. Forgiveness didn't arrive wrapped in a bow. It came in pieces. A brother showing up without entitlement. A father choosing reflection over control. A daughter choosing herself without apology. I never got the apology I thought I needed from Dad for that Christmas Eve. But maybe I didn't need it. Maybe the fact that he stood at the edge of my porch, finally unsure of himself, was enough. Or maybe I no longer needed his permission to move forward. I still remember that night outside the window, watching them laugh and pass bourbon like I'd never existed. That moment broke something open, but it also carved a path. Because the truth is, sometimes being left out is what leads you home. This story didn't end in revenge. It ended in reclamation. Of land, of self, of peace earned, not given. And from now on, anyone who sits at my table does so because they've earned their place. Not out of guilt, not out of blood, but out of choice. The gate stays locked until it shouldn't be. The snow still comes, but now it clears the air instead of burying me in silence. The land doesn't just hold my name, it holds my boundaries, my peace, my past, rewritten on my own terms. And I will never again ask for permission to exist.